The sound of chimes first rang out over Elizabeth exactly 51 years ago today, at 10 a.m. on Friday the 22nd of May, 1970. Comprising Westminster Chimes, the 5 bells weigh 1,328 kilograms, while the stricker weighs 500. The bells were made at the Whitechapel Bell foundry in London and were stamped at the time of casting with the name Mears and dated 1968 London. The bells do not swing back and forth, but are stationary and are struck by a mechanical hammer. Meanwhile, the striker was made by Messrs. Gillen and Johnston of Croydon, England, once again continuing Elizabeth's strong British connections, so prevalent in the early formative years of what was once a city in its own right. It was hoped that the chimes would first ring out over Elizabeth on New Year's Eve to welcome in 1970. Unfortunately, the striker did not arrive in time. The master clock, which is housed in the ground level of the clock tower, has inbuilt batteries which are automatically charged to take over in the event of a power failure. Construction on the clock tower began in the late 1960s, at the same time that construction began on the Elizabeth Public Library. Elizabeth's first library was in Elizabeth South, opening in 1957. 2 years prior, in 1955, the same year in which the first residents began moving into Elizabeth, a new bill encouraging the provision of public library services in the state was passed through Parliament. It became the Libraries Subsidies Act, providing for a government subsidy to councils for expenditure on approved public library services, and the Elizabeth South Library became the first public library in South Australia to be supported by a local authority under this Act. Discussions regarding the provision of the service began in 1957 between the District Council of Salisbury, the Libraries Board of South Australia, and the South Australian Housing Trust. As a result of this, the Trust provided premises rent-free in the Elizabeth South Shopping Centre, and the library doors were first opened on December the 11th, 1957 by the Premier Sir Thomas Playford, just a few minutes after the shopping centre itself had been officially opened for trading. The library started with 4,000 books and a staff of 2. From the beginning, the demand exceeded all estimates, and during the evening of the first day, it became necessary to bring out additional librarians from Adelaide to help with the rush. 2 days later, an additional 500 books were sent from Adelaide to help keep up supplies. Nearly 500 readers registered at the library on the first day, and by the end of December, 1,500 people, or 20% of the 7,000 residents that lived in Elizabeth at that time, had enrolled as borrowers. In 1960, 2 more branches were opened, one at Salisbury North and the other in the Elizabeth North Shopping Centre. As the city of Elizabeth grew, plans were underway for the building of the new large central library, which was opened in the Elizabeth Town Centre on September the 15th, 1969. Up to that time, approximately 1,600,000 book loans had been made from the Elizabeth South and North branches. At the opening of the Elizabeth Public Library, meanwhile, construction on the clock tower continued. Every town centre needs a focal point, and in Elizabeth, the much-loved clock tower, based at the Elizabeth City Centre, is that focal point, and since the 22nd of May 1970 has remained the constant, while Elizabeth has endured many changes in its status and fortunes. Born just 6 years after Elizabeth won its independence as a city in its own right, the tower has witnessed its status reduced from city to suburb, and bore witness to so many of the innovations and community services that were launched in and around Elizabeth City Centre with so much enthusiasm in the 1960s. And today watches over an Elizabeth that is, which more and more seems disconnected and far removed from the Elizabeth that was.